Join the coven. Before we begin the video, I would just like to give a huge thank you to ZakBabyTV for contributing to this video. If you don't know who he is, he's an amazing, talented fellow narrator, and you should really show him some love. The link to his channel will be available in the description down below. Back when I was in first year high school, I was part of this choir where we would sing the songs our school required us to sing, like the national anthem or some church song. To be honest, I wasn't the best singer, and only joined for the benefit of skipping class. The skipping class part was great and all, but staying late for practice was kind of a downside, especially when it was before a big school event. One day we had to practice near the school's botanical garden because the place where we usually practiced was being occupied by another group of people. Some of the members of the choir were kind of hesitant about practicing near the gardens because there have been a lot of scary stories surrounding the place, and no two accounts were the same. I, on the other hand, just wanted practice to be over. We practiced until around 8 or 9 p.m. At around this time, there would be only 2 gates that would be open if one wanted to leave the school. The college gate, which was all the way across from where we practiced, and the track and field gate, which was near but you had to pass through the garden to get there. Me, being a lazy man, decided to take the shortest route outside the school, while the rest wished me luck and went the opposite way. I believe that any place can be as creepy as long as it is dark, and the gardens were no exception. I brought my phone to call my parents. It rang once before being answered. I talked into the phone, telling my parents where to pick me up, but no answer. I stopped the call and called again. Same thing, no answer. I called for the 3rd time, and to ask them to pick me up, almost shouting into the phone for an answer. But nothing. Finally, I gave up and decided to text message them. After walking through the garden for about a couple more minutes, I finally reached my waiting destination without incident. It was a creepy walk, but I was kind of relieved that nothing out of the ordinary happened. My parents came after about 15 minutes of waiting, but something was off. When they stopped the car in front of me, they got out and asked if I was okay with a very worried expression on their faces. I said I was fine. They told me they had got my calls, and I asked them what they heard. They said they heard my voice saying, "Help me," over and over again.
A week or so ago, I went for my very first job interview that I had got called for. It was just a 10-minute bus ride away, and I happened to get a seat alone because it was like 10 a.m., meaning rush hours were well over. So, there I was, 18 and all dressed for the occasion and looking kinda like Amy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I was sitting there minding my own business, listening to music, when I made eye contact with a man I'd never seen before. He looked to be in his mid-30s, had dark, tightly curled hair, somewhat of a small beard, and a creepo-style mustache. I didn't take any notice until I was getting off, and he got off too, saying, "Hello," to me. Being nice, I said hi back, not taking too much notice, and thanked the bus driver. Straight away, this guy was on me. He began to ask my name and what my number was. I felt really uneasy and creeped out, so I told him I wasn't allowed to tell random strangers that because my parents are very protective, which is a total lie. They're actually chill when it comes to these things. He then began this pity spiel about how he came from somewhere in India and had no friends or family in Ireland and how he was so lonely. He then asked for my address and I ignored him again, and he was saying how he'd meet my parents and they could get to like him. I instantly lied and said my interview was really soon, when really it actually wasn't for another 50 minutes, but whatever. Made a good impression by being early. I came out afterwards feeling good, and this dude was waiting outside for me. He began to stroll around with me and followed me into the pharmacy because I needed to buy something. He then began telling me how he worked as a chef in a resort in the village and he would bring me for tea. I lied once again and told him I had no money, to which he said he'd pay for me because the bus wouldn't be there for another hour. Of course, I declined and said I wanted to have a walk around by myself because my friends living nearby would be meeting me. Lies. After I told him that, he thankfully turned around and walked away, and I never saw him again.
The following is a very true experience. I've never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if, in some way unknown, it changed me. My parents had a house in the Inland Empire of Southern California, and at that time my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house was a 2-story house located in a cul-de-sac on the bottom floor. There was 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath. All you could see from the street was the garage and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor, and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door, you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran along the side of the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you could see from the street. Then you passed the bathroom window and another bedroom window. Then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now, for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down to the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap with nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about it then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mother was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere, I suddenly awoke, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know what woke me, or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the night light of my bedroom, I sat up and started looking around my room. All of a sudden, something caught my eye. At the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the streetlight reflecting on the window, but I knew for a fact there was only one streetlight, and what I was looking at was 2 obvious, glowing spots that were spaced apart as if on someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember thinking these things, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered then that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night. But this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These 2 were very solid, bright white glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them, frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright. Nothing else stood out. That void or face around the eyes looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how could a cat be big like a person? And why would a cat stand up and stare into my bedroom? The curiosity got me, and I went for it. I flipped my covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window, and put my feet on the floor. This is the moment the creepiest thing happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed and got on my knees to get a closer look at this so-called cat. When at this very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes begins to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween. Eyes still locked on me, not blinking once. The feeling of dread and fear shot through my body. Completely terrified, I burst into tears immediately and booked it down the hallway, through the living room and up the stairs to tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, it felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset. I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face, and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down, just enough for me to get out the words. There's white eyes looking at me through my window on the bottom. Stutter, crying hard. Are you sure? My mom asked. I cry out loud. Yes! She didn't even go down to look. She just called the police. I don't remember the time it took for them to arrive, or what they said, because I had finally fallen asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door, and my mom going to open it. The cop speaks to her, and I hear her say, "Okay, thank you, good night." She shuts the door. "Did they find it, Mommy?" I asked, half asleep. "No, honey, he said they couldn't find anyone." My mom told me softly, "It's okay now. Just try and go back to sleep." It's safe to say that the next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward, and I'm in middle school now. Every now and then, I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there, those unforgettable white eyes. One random day, a thought came up, and I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She says, "Yes, of course. Why?" "I don't know. I was just wondering, I guess," I said. Then my mom proceeds to say, "Well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, he told me they had made it a priority to get out to our house as soon as they could, because not very long before I called 911, they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window in our same neighborhood." Hearing that sent chills down my spine, and to this day, I wonder who or what was looking at me that night.
So, I grew up in Las Vegas. I'd moved there when I was in the 2nd grade. I was around 7 or so. My mother was working at some sort of motorcycle repair shop in Arizona that just wasn't paying the bills all too well. She jumped at the offer of a new job, of course. Fast forward about 5 years. I'm in middle school now. My brother and I were almost exactly 2 years apart, and I was about to turn 12, so he was 10 at the time. My mother, being quite low on the seniority list, was forced to work late nights, which left me and my brother home alone after school more often than not. Our nights were usually pretty uneventful, usually consisted of us avoiding whatever homework was assigned, warming up leftovers in the microwave, and watching whatever sparked our interest on the TV. We usually ended up in bed before our mom got home, but occasionally we'd wait up for her. One night, or I suppose one afternoon, considering it was still broad daylight, everything was pretty normal. My brother sat on the living room floor, engulfed in whatever was on the TV, and I was using my mom's desktop computer feeding my virtual pets. Then, all of a sudden, there was a rather aggressive knock at the door, which was very odd. I was sort of an outcast child. I didn't really have too many friends, nor did my brother. Even then, we lived in what you would consider a senior living community. My mother was the youngest adult there and was around her mid-30s. My brother, being too short to reach the peephole, doesn't move, only slightly reacts and looks at me. I get up from the computer chair and make my way to the front door to glance out the peephole. I see a man in a black ski mask staring back at me through the peephole. It definitely doesn't seem real. It sort of seemed like something from a cliché movie, as if he was dressed to rob a bank. I was immediately scared, and I obviously didn't bother asking who it was. I silently stepped away, shut the TV off, grabbed my brother and our small black Pomeranian, and ran towards my bedroom. Once we were safely hidden in my closet, I informed him of what I saw outside. He didn't say much, but was visibly shook up, just quietly stood there holding our dog. I slid the tiny flip phone our mom left us for emergencies from my pocket and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator the entirety of the call, as I didn't think that the man had left, considering the knocks persisted after we left the living room. Yet somehow she understood me and sent an officer over. Immediately after the call ended with the operator, I dialed for our mother. I explained everything to her. She ended up leaving work early and ended up home around the same time the police had. I'm not quite sure what deterred him of pursuing further, but of course, the man was gone by the time they both had arrived. The officer was very clearly not taking any of it seriously, most likely thinking these two young boys were just paranoid from staying home alone. "It was probably some young man playing a joke on a friend of his," was his explanation. However, like I stated previously, we lived in a senior living community. Who could he possibly be playing a joke on? His dear grandmother? He then gave my brother and I stickers, as if this would console our nerves after seeing some masked madman pounding on our door. Fortunately, I never saw the stranger after that. After that experience, my house, however, had been broken into, as well as my car 3 times. Thankfully, none of us were present when any of this took place. Since, my family and I have moved out of state and installed a security system. So this happened to me a few years ago when I was a freshman in college. I'm now a junior, and it's still insane to think about. At this point in my 20-year-old female young adult life, I've been around the block and I've definitely had lots of freaky encounters with men since entering college, but I've always considered this one to be one of the worst. For a little background, I go to school in the Boston area, and there's a local burger chain that has a few locations sprinkled around the city. I believe they have a partnership with Fenway, so it's a fairly popular business, and I loved going there with my friends in the first few months I was at the college. One Saturday night in December, I went there with a few friends after we'd smoked a little weed and wanted to get something to eat. We walked in and it was pretty crowded, so we all got in line and waited the order. Something I've discovered about myself since being in college and dealing with lots of creepy guys is that I have a really strong sense of intuition, and I can honestly tell when someone's going to be weird with me. We'd eventually advance towards the front of the line, and there was only one register open. One of the men working in the kitchen, it's an open kitchen concept, saw me and came over to open another register before calling me over. I was waiting in line behind my friend, who was just one person away from being at the register, so I thought it was odd that he hasn't asked her to come over since she was next in line. Plus, the line had died down at that point, and a second register wasn't really needed, especially since they only had one when the line was longer. So, I already knew something was up, but I figured it was going to be a typical being hit on experience, so I tried not to worry. I got to the register and he started chatting me up, asking how my night was, etc. I tried to be polite, but really focused more on ordering my hot dog, so I gave him my order and paid with my credit card. As is customary, 2 receipts were printed out, one of which being for the business to keep. This is important. I took my own receipt and went to sit down with my friends until my order was called. I honestly didn't remember if he took any orders after mine, but regardless, while I was waiting, I noticed he kept stealing looks at me and I tried to brush it off. Another employee was bringing out trays and calling orders. Some of my friends had just gotten their food. Eventually, my order was finished, and the man from the register realized it was mine and brought it over to the counter himself to give it to me personally. I didn't even look at him in the face when I took it because I had such a weird feeling about the whole thing that kept getting worse. While we sat there eating, he kept staring at me and I mentioned it to my friends, but they tried to reassure me and told me not to worry because they were there. When we mostly finished, he came over and offered to throw away our trash, specifically mine at first, to which we declined. It was still fucking packed, and it wasn't really normal that this guy was trying so hard to cater to one group and not everyone else, especially when he was supposed to be in the kitchen. We left and things seemed fine, but I kept having this feeling that something bad was going to happen and the situation hadn't really ended. The next day, I was busy doing some studio work in a short film. I'm an animation major, so I was at the arts building for most of the morning. Once I came home, I took a nap because I had been animating basically all day, and I woke up around 5 p.m. I checked my phone to see what time it was, and I saw that I had gotten a request on Facebook Messenger. I didn't recognize the name, but I could honestly say that in the back of my mind, I had a horrible feeling that it was the cashier guy from the night before. And I was right. I opened Messenger, looked at his Facebook profile picture, and immediately felt one of those most sickening, shocked feelings I had ever felt. I looked through his photos, still absolutely shocked, and basically had an anxiety attack. He had sent me a friend request and multiple messages that said exactly this.
"Oh my god, no way, I can't believe this is you." "I believe so, but LOL, I was scrolling through Facebooks and I believe I seen you yesterday."
He then tried to add me on Messenger.
"I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I'm just like in shock you popped up. LMAO."
First of all, this guy is full of shit. There is legitimately no way that he wasn't intentionally searching for my profile for numerous reasons. First, the Facebook algorithm really only shows you people that you might know through mutual friends. I was 18 at the time, and all my recommended friends had either gone to school with me or had mutual friends. There were literally pictures of me at my high school graduation from that year. This guy was almost 30 years old, clearly knew how young I was, and had no mutual friends and lived nowhere near me. And second, my profile picture at the time was my dog, so he wouldn't have known it was me unless he'd purposely looked me up. None of that just scrolling through. And lastly, I'm only one of 2 people on Facebook with the name with my last name, so it's really hard to spell. There's seriously no way you'd find me without actually looking. So of course, I was absolutely terrified and was trying to figure out how he'd possibly tracked me down. But then I remembered the second receipt, and how I used my credit card and how my name was printed on the paper. That was the only way he could have figured it out, so I assumed he kept that receipt for himself or wrote my name down for later. And then, I remembered that I had worn my college sweatshirt at the restaurant that night, and how my college was also listed on my profile. It was literally just a few minutes down the road from where he worked. Panicking, I told my friends, who were also incredibly shocked, and we tried to figure out what to do. We went and ate at the dining hall, discussing what had happened, and eventually I ended up back in my dorm. Upon getting to my room, I realized he'd tried to video chat with me while I was at dinner, following up with,
Didn't mean that.
but I'm sure he would have meant it if I had answered. We ended up calling the restaurant and got stuck listening to a directory, so my friend left a message explaining the situation. I was too freaked out, and we hoped for an eventual response. They literally never got back to us. Meanwhile, I called my other friend, who commutes from home, and told her about what had happened. She told her mom, who immediately called the restaurant and actually got through to a person on the other line. She explained the situation, and they seriously didn't even do anything. All she got was a half-hearted, "Yeah, we'll talk to him," but said they wouldn't fire him, and nothing more. There was no real feeling of resolution there. During this whole thing, he sent me another message around 10:30, clearly desperate to pry a response out of me.
I'm just so curious if it's you.
Needless to say, I was extremely freaked out by this whole thing, and of course never responded and took screenshots of everything and went to the campus security the next day just to give him a description of the guy, just in case. I ended up not finishing my film and showing up late to the class because I was literally too petrified to leave the house. Luckily, my teacher was understanding. I do know that somebody clearly did talk to him because he blocked me on Facebook a few days later, but I still felt uneasy. Time went on, and I eventually felt better about the whole thing, but my friends and I had never gone back to that restaurant. It was kind of a bummer because I really liked it there, but I was advised by the campus security to stay away. Plus, I wasn't really keen on potentially running into him again anyways. I've since made my profile more private, and a lot of my information is now hidden from public view. I was also afraid to use my credit card for a while, which sucked, but it's not an issue anymore.